All right, folks, I have a bonus upload to end the night off with. It is truly a bonus of bonuses. So earlier I did the memorial for Claudia Ackley, a wonderful friend, a wonderful person. So many people have heard her and have heard what she says on other, on different platforms and stuff, read about her. To know her is a completely different thing. To have her tell you she loves you as a genuine person is just truly amazing. And she is missed. There's another person that put me in touch with Claudia and also put me in touch with Tim Baker. And that's who you are going to hear right now. Former forestry officer and former police officer. Before we get into this, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this upload, shall we? All right, everybody. Today I have a very special guest. I've had this person on a while back. I narrated his Tennessee encounters just recently. A lot of you know him, and you've heard him from a couple different interviews on my show and a couple other shows. But this guy knows so much about so many different things because of where he lives and what he's done. Tonight I have Donald Coleman Jr. with us. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm fine. You can just call me Don. How about that?
I know that, sir. But it is a pleasure having you back on. A lot of people haven't heard, I've got a lot of new subs, so they may have not heard what you've went through and what you've lived. So I kind of want to, just kind of go over a few things with you. And I know you've had, the last thing I kind of want to talk about is the reptilian encounter that you've had. But I kind of want to let everybody know who you are and what you've experienced. So when did you kind of become aware of there's something else besides deer and raccoon and possum out in the woods?
Well, I had an encounter way back in '81 when I was a police officer, and while I was on duty, and I first disclosed that on Oklahoma Dogman Sasquatch Oklahoma Encounters with Dr. Lance Hightower. When I was a police officer, I was on patrol one night. I kept hearing large, like somebody was running a bush hog, and it was like, at first heard it, I went on duty at midnight, about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was hearing that noise, and it was over by Hassel Used Lumber Company, which is off of Highway 13, Tennessee Highway 13 South. It kind of snakes through downtown Collinwood. And anyway, I walked around the building, and it's a small building. I walked around it, and I had my shotgun out. I got my police shotgun out because I didn't know what I was going to encounter. And I smelled an odd smell. I thought maybe the sewer lines, broken or something like that. Just alerted me to that area, and I shined my spotlight on the police car all around it, up in the trees a little bit. And so I went, I said, well, maybe it's my imagination. And I went back on patrol, and I turned my patrol car. I was in town there's a water tower there, and there's a little park underneath it. And Hassel Hughes was like 100 yards from where I was sitting. So I turned my whole radio off and everything and just listened. And I could hear that brush popping again. It sounded like an ice storm that's heavy laden on limbs, and it snaps, and it sounds like a shotgun going off. Okay. And so it alerted me back over there. I had actually gone back to HQ. I felt really sick into my stomach, and I went back to HQ and got some, something, the Pepto-Bismol or something to calm us. I took about a 15-minute break, went back over there. It's about 3:30, something like that. And I said, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to park down the street. I think it was a gravel road then. It's paved now, but I think it was gravel. And I had on patent leather shoes, so they could hear me coming. I really couldn't get a good sneak, so I went over to the ditch line that had a lot of Johnson grass in it, and it was up to my neck. I'm 6'5", and it's up to my neck, and I'm wading through it with the shotgun out. I clipped my 357, and I had my KL flashlight out, and I creeped up there, and I started shining my flashlight a little higher in the tree line, and I saw a pair of glowing red eyes looking down from me. But that really scared me right there. I didn't know what it was, and I saw a pair of glowing red eyes, and then I heard a guttural growl, and I thought, I shouldn't be afraid, but then it kind of hit my lower stomach, and instantly it's like a dog, when a dog's scared, their hair goes up on the back of their neck, and it was kind of like that. And I have a great sixth sense, and I said, something came over and said, you fix to get into something you don't want to get into. I thought, well, I got a shotgun, a 357 Magnum. Who should I be afraid of? Like that. I'm, having this conversation, and I finally dropped down, and it was like, I think it was the Lord telling me, drop down right now, face first. You're going to get into something like that. I go, this is insane. I was real gung-ho back in those days. I kind of remind myself as on Third Watch, that guy that's always hyper. I think his actor's name was Jason Wiles. They called him Bosco. Okay. And I had a Bosco attitude back then, and Boscarelli, that's what they called him. And anyway, I went down on the ground, and as I was going down, this thing stood up, and it was at least 13 feet off the ground, and it took a hard step from the tree line, and I mean the ground shook. Wow! I go, good God, what am I getting into? And so I looked up. I could see I was glowing red eyes, and he was right under the trees, right at the edge of the road. And he stepped 2 steps toward me, and then I took the safety off the shotgun, and about that time I pulled that 357 out and cocked it. I thought, well, I don't want to get into this with this, whatever this is. I don't want to, because about 50 feet from where he was a row of about 6 houses shaped in a horseshoe like that. And I was afraid I was going to get in a gunfight, and somebody would get injured or killed, like collateral damage, which I didn't want. And so I just laid there real quiet, real still, and it grunted a couple of times and then just turned around and walked back through the tree line and walked back. And at that time, I just lost my bowels. I mean, I just crapped myself real bad.
Right.
And it was such a tremendous fear that came over me. I waited about 15 minutes, crawled on my hands and knees, put my guns up, put the safeties back on, crawled on my hands and knees, got in my patrol car, went to and it was diarrhea down both legs. Horrific event.
Real quick,
so,
Donald, really quick. Do you think, now, I had thought about this when you had mentioned previously that you had a stomach ache earlier in the night. Now, do you think it could have been the smell, or do you think it could have been some sort of like, I don't know, not a mental, like, not like telekinesis, but maybe some sort of mental inner reaction with what was going on that made your stomach hurt so bad?
No, I had a stomach ache before I went on duty because I worked from 12 midnight to 8 a.m. I had to do the school crossing and stuff.
Okay. So you're already sick.
I was already sick.
Okay. All right.
And at that time I was living with the chief of police. We were splitting an apartment, and he was, I didn't want to wake him up going in and have a change of clothes and all that stuff. So I thought so I went back to the fire department and got in the shower with my full uniform on. Of course, I took my utility belt off and gun and all that, put it on the counter, and took a cold shower. Then I took a hot shower and I took a cold shower. And then I took my stripped down just about naked and just, soaked my clothes in the shower to let the water run, clean the crap off my clothes. And then I went I was real shaking real bad, and I went and got the fire department blanket off one of the fire trucks.
Yeah.
And I wrapped up turned the lights off into the fire hall. I had my KO with me, and I laid down there. Man, I lost it. I lost everything. I mean, not my bowels. I'm talking about emotional, mental breakdown.
Yeah, just crying.
And I cried it's like I got the worst beating ever, know.
Yeah.
And so I cleaned it up real good. I know how to get something dry. I use a lot of towels and all that stuff. And still was, of course, it was damp and cold. And I tried to clean up the patrol car as best I could. And then I went down to Melvin's. It's a restaurant on 13 South, just about a quarter of a mile down the road from where I was sitting at that water tower. And Melvin goes, "Oh, you look like hell, Mr. Melvin. I don't feel like talking right now. Just give me a cup of coffee so I, stay awake longer." And I found some hairs about 13 feet up in the tree, and I got a ladder, and I went back after everybody at Hassel Hughes had gone home for the day, and I went back and I found 2 or 3 hairs, black hairs, and I saw a footprint that was 20 inches, and it was 6 inches across at the heel.
Wow.
And I could have, plaster cast that thing and turn those hairs in, and I thought, who is going to believe this?
Yeah.
I mean, I just witnessed it, and I saw it, but who is going to believe this? Since I just got out of the academy, I covered the evidence up, burned up the hairs, and covered it up. I did measure the footprint, and it was in white gravel rock, but it made an impression. That's how heavy this thing was.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's 80 what, 82, 81.
81.
It wasn't talked about like it is nowadays. I mean, the Gimlin film had just come out. You had some books here and there.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Well,
anything...
I thought it was up in I thought Polk, Arkansas probably has it, and then over there in the Pacific Northwest, I never knew these cryptids were all around us the whole time.
Yeah. No. Yeah, you're right. You know, it's crazy. Like, you turned me on to Tim Baker, Kuhnbo.
Yeah.
And, you know, he, in his investigations, it was, you know, I've learned so much from him just talking to him. He automatically assumed all these things were Bigfoot. And then he realized one night that he had misidentified a lot of these things and said, well, I need to go back and look. A lot of these encounters were Dogman.
Yeah.
And you know, it's because it wasn't talked about so widely back then. You know, I mean, we're at a great time in research because we have the internet. We have the capability of communicating with everybody and anybody nowadays. You know, it was hard back when you were starting out. You know.
Yeah, it was never talked about, and all these like Cott County up in East Tennessee. I went to the law enforcement academy with a lot of those deputies up there, and nothing was ever said about this stuff. I never heard it, even when I went to LBL with my cousin Scott and been up in Grand Rapids, Kentucky. Never heard anybody say anything because I didn't know these things existed until Lon Stryker told me back in 2015 when I was on his show, when I wrote the whole storyline and sent it in to him, and he acted like he didn't want to believe me. And I said, well, Lon, I said, if anybody's not believable as your stories up there, wherever you're from, you know, some of the stuff you said, if I was in law enforcement, I'd put you in protective custody and investigate you for making comments like that.
Right.
You know, I said, I'm telling you the truth. And so he contacted somebody around Scott County, and he goes, he's telling the truth.
Yeah. Look, speaking of which, you just mentioned Cott County. You're in Tennessee. What do you think about those two cases that happened up there? What's your opinion on that? The Amber Miller and the Tony Aarons case, same road, you know, roughly 2 months apart. How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's Dogman. They're covering it up.
Yeah.
It's Dogman. I mean, what would tear somebody up like that?
Yeah.
And then sometimes, and a lot of times, excuse me, Jeffrey, a lot of times it's not what they're saying, it's what they're not saying.
Yep.
There's a key right there. What are they not saying? And of course, if we do have bears, we've got bears in Hardin County. I didn't know it until somebody caught it on the Facebook camera and filmed it up by Pickwick Dam. I didn't know that. But Tim Kuhnbo Baker told me, he said that's why they named it Bear Creek, because back when they were forming Pickwick Lake, there were bear back in there.
Yeah. Tim's like an encyclopedia of knowledge on cryptids.
Tim is like a PhD in cryptozoology.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
he knows things, and if he doesn't know things, he'll tell you he doesn't know.
Yeah, no, he will. Now, you had, after that, what were you thinking? You kind of let it go until you had
I got out. I left Collinwood, and I thought I'd go back to restaurant hotel management. So I got a job at JP Seafields. It was a 425 seat restaurant in Germantown, and I worked out there for about 6-7 months. Then I left and I went into security, and I went into they put me at Holiday Inns. They started at Night Arnold Lamar, and then I moved up to Union Avenue Holiday Inn, and then I ended up at the Holiday Inn Rivermont, which is a 14-story campus and stuff. It's high as far as the elevation is and stuff.
Okay.
And the guy, I really did my job really well, and the guy called me up, and he was over the whole Holiday Inn. He said, I'm impressed with the reports you file every night. I can tell you do your job. I said, oh, I'm going to do my job and everything. And he took me back in the kitchen. And, man, I'm talking about he had it was like a showroom of all the food they served there at the Holiday Inn. That's 8 or 9 stories there. that was 14 stories. That's how many rooms they had. He says, I'll tell you what I'll do. You keep writing those reports. Anything you want to eat, you get it, you fix it, and you write it down, put it on mine, I cover it. Like that. I said, well, nobody's ever treated me that nice.
Right.
And so what I did is I went out and fed a bunch of my workers out in the guard shack and all that. I said, look, you do your job. You need me for something. You have them pays me inside the river mine. I come out here and help you. And I took care of my people and stuff. And so I did that for a while. I got missed in law enforcement. So I got a job at South Fulton Police Department as a public safety officer, which that means we did fire and police. When the fire trucks went out, we were part-time firemen.
You were is that where you were dispatching to, or no?
Yeah, I was dispatching there. I was working the 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift. She went home at 1. I had to go in and dispatch. This is before 911.
Right.
And this is when I got that call about a woman saying she had a home invasion. So I knew what to ask for. I said, ma'am, do you work at a federally funded bank? Are you a bank teller? No, I'm not. I don't work at a bank. I said, okay. Because if she said she did, I called the FBI immediately and stuff. But I said, well, ma'am, where are you located? And it's O-B-I-O-N is O'Brien, because you live in the South. It's pronounced that way. It's probably supposed to be O'Brien or O'Brien, but it's O'Brien Sheriff's Department. And she was in the northeast corner of O'Brien County up to Weakley on the Kentucky state line. I said, why don't you call those other people, those sheriff's departments in Kentucky and in Tennessee? And she goes, well, you're the only one answering the phone. I said, yeah, they do go to bed at night. And well, they did. I mean, that's where it was.
Right.
And so I had a funny feeling that this was a bogus call. I mean, instantly I had that feeling. So I said, well, ma'am, I said, I can't send a unit because you're out of my jurisdiction, but I'll see if I can help you further. So I got on the low band and called the Memphis district of the Tennessee Highway Patrol. I said, I need to speak to the commanding officer, ASAP 1033 emergency traffic. Have him call me on public service, which is a telephone back then. He called me up. He's a captain. He said, what do you have? I told him, I said, it's a home invasion. They're holding 2 people hostage. The woman's upstairs under a bed. Call me. I said, I think this is a bogus call, but how do you want to proceed? Because I'll need your mutual aid assistance on this, because I can't. It's out of my jurisdiction. How do you want to proceed? First thing out of his mouth, how far is this from LBL? I go, what the hell does this got to do with LBL? I said, probably 100 miles. I was just guessing. And he said, we're going to treat it like a real call. Now, that ought to tell you something right there.
Yeah, yeah. What was the lady saying?
She was saying that 2 guys broke into her home, and she was already going upstairs, and she ran on upstairs and slid under the bed, and they were holding her daughter and her boyfriend hostage.
Okay.
And so she started calling all these, and she called me, and I thought, and when she said that, I said, and she doesn't work for a bank, I thought, why would they be doing it at 1 o'clock in the morning, in South Fulton, O'Brien County of all places? That don't make sense.
Right.
And stuff. So I felt like it was a bogus call, and it was.
Right, but then the captain made that statement, and that was only 7-8 months after? Yeah, 7 or 8 months. If it's happened in March or April, this was about the middle of December, the end of the year of 1982. If it happened then, I don't know. I've heard 82, 83, but whenever it happened, that's what that officer asked. The captain said, how far is this from LBL? And I'm going, of course, I didn't know that the murders happened at LBL at all. Right.
And it's like, I remember things like that, you know, and I'm going, what are we talking about?
Mm.
You know, so he treated, and we sent so many, it looked like the Sugarland Express on that movie that Goldie Hawn was in. And I bet we had 30 agencies out there. I mean, we had ambulance, rescue squads. We even took the fire department out there.
Wow.
And it was a bogus call. And the woman lived by herself.
Wow. Wow. But
And
that
she got
does...
11 months and 29 days in county jail.
Good. But that does show that something really happened in the LBL. Just,
Yeah.
You know.
And but I didn't find out about the LBL till 2015.
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
And so anyway, if you look at Sasquatch encounter, I called it the shadow creature. What I called it in '81, almost to the month. In August of '91, I had my first Dogman encounter.
all right.
And that's when it ran across the road from Harpinsville Road across State Highway 35 in Mississippi around Scott and Lee County, and it ran across the road heading actually toward where my park is. And that thing was 8 feet on all fours. It had a hyena head and a lion's mange, but the markings didn't add up. And that's what confused me there. And of course, the other show was saying I didn't believe you at first, but then he remembered a story a state trooper said the same thing. And so I told him what happened. I said, it freaked me out so bad. I wanted to get out of the car, you know, and it was pitch black dark. That was a stupid move in me to make. And my wife, and she had her 2 kids with us, and she says, don't you think about getting out of this car. Just get out of here, you know, like that. And I just wanted to see, did I just see that? That's how fast these things move.
Yeah.
And people don't realize it. I mean, they move. I mean, I was doing 55. I saw something coming out of the on my right side, and I hit the high beams, and that's what caught it coming right toward my car. And you know, if I hadn't slammed on the brakes, I was doing about 55, 60, and he was moving at that speed. And if I hadn't slammed on my brakes, I'd have hit that thing, you know, T-boned it.
Right.
So that was the first Dogman encounter I had. And it so freaked her out so bad. And she said, don't you talk about it. You may lose your job if you bring it up. And I go, well, that's probably true. And so I covered that one up. I covered a bunch of stuff up because I didn't want to lose my job.
Right. Yeah.
And here I was, a law enforcement officer. You know, both
times.
times.
You were working at the park as like a game warden.
Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And then it was called the Department of Natural Resources. And when I first went to a gold memorial, then it became the Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And then about 1990, a federal park ranger in Gulfport got killed in the line of duty. And before I left the Park Service, they were sending everybody to the Law Enforcement Training Academy in Mississippi. I thought, why do I have to go? Oh, I'll just need to qualify on the gun range. I've already been through 6 weeks of Tennessee's Law Enforcement Academy and stuff. And so thankfully, I left the department and moved up to my second wife's hometown in Savannah, Tennessee, in Hardin County. And then, you know, it was 95. I had my 72 Cutlass. Mom and Dad and I were driving down the Iuka from Pickwick. Is about 20 miles, something like that, 22 miles. And we were looking at landscape, how people landscape around their homes, stuff, just kind of give us an idea of what we need to do, especially at her home in Savannah, Tennessee. And it was I saw topping the hill at Gold Island, the Corinth and Council Railroad overpass bridge, we ran across Highway 25. there was a church and a cemetery in the background and a red brick ranch style home that was closer to the railroad overpass bridge in the levee, the railroad, and between Gold Island Road and Elks Landing Road, which both go to Yellow Creek. That's where the 10-time waterway is, Yellow Creek. This thing comes out at 10 o'clock in the morning, broad daylight, but it was overcast, cloudy, and it was still, the leaves hadn't come on the trees yet. It's early part of March. Comes out on all fours, I thought, it looked like the size of a big black cow. I go, wait a minute, there ain't no black cow. And it was another Dogman creature. But this one was solid black. I sped up, it crossed my car in front of me. And I was a half a car length just before I got up to it. And I saw that thing, solid black eyes. He went over to the, about 25, 30 yards was a ravine. He got down and went down in that ravine. And as big as that thing was, he cloaked. I mean, he disappeared in the twinkling of an eye.
Right.
And so I would measure that thing. It was about up to the, on all fours, it looked like it was about 8 feet long and about almost 5 feet tall.
At
on
the
all
shoulders?
fours. Do what?
At the shoulders, 5 foot, or 5 foot at the head?
At the head, 5 foot at the head, tall, but it's on all fours. It was 8 feet long.
Right. So he was a big...
And that was a big one.
Yeah.
And my parents freaked out. I had a gun in the car. I could have capped a 357 Magnum. My parents said, go on, don't you say a word. Everybody that sees these things with me freaks them out so bad, scares them so bad, they tell me to shut up. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to, don't you talk about it.
Right.
So I kept silent for 20-some years.
Well, I think that's a big thing down south is because, since starting this channel, I've talked to a lot of people, and a majority of them are from down south. And, they see them, and they see them a lot down there, but they just shut up and they don't talk about them.
No, because they're well, first of all, who's going to believe them?
Right. Maybe at the privacy of the dinner table or something, or whatever.
I don't think it's that. I think that people are so scared, Jeffrey, that they just, it's like you're scared silent.
Yeah.
And people are seeing more of these things down there. I had somebody, 40-year researcher, called me up, came from Lon Stryker's group, and he was telling me some things about the waterway.
Mm-hmm.
I said he worked on the waterway when it was being developed, 74 to 85. Okay, he saw Bigfoot, and he saw Dogman. And they were like, the Dogman was orange and the Bigfoot was big. He went camping down there in one of the camping grounds they built on Bay Springs Lake. That's the first lake as you leave Pickford. You got to go down a 33-mile divide cut. There's a campground. I actually camped, years later I camped there, but he hoisted, he cooked several pork Boston butts, put them in coolers and put them up on about 10 or 12 feet off the ground. And he knew that the Bigfoot were in there, I thought. So he was telling me the story. He said he was sleeping in a tent. I go, why in the world would you sleep in a tent knowing these things are down there? You like Tim Coonbo Baker, you ain't scared of nothing.
Right.
And so he told me, he says he heard a commotion and they broke open the two boxes and got those two Boston butt smoked shoulders out and took off with them. And when he woke up the next morning, he saw a brim of pine cone where it's like Bigfoot saying thank you for the meal. Like a pine cone, a seashell, like mussel shell,
like a
and
little gift.
a brim.
Yeah.
that's the way Bigfoot shows their, thankful, the gratitude that you fed them.
Yeah, yeah. Now, that waterway there, I remember you telling me a story a while ago about a helicopter crashing or something. Was that at that waterway too? Or
No,
no?
that was if you look on WHNT TV out of Huntsville, Alabama,
Uh-huh.
the story's on there about the helicopter that guy was flying over, I guess, checking transmission lines that would, cross the river and stuff. And so he got disabled and he went across the Natchez Trace Bridge, and he went across on the Culver County, Alabama side. And I remember Kumbo was telling me about there's Bigfoot all up and down the waterway through there.
Yeah.
That's not far from where he lives.
No.
Around Sheffield, Alabama. He lives out from Sheffield, but it's not that far from where Sheffield. And the guy radioed, and he said he had to emergency land the helicopter, and they said, don't move, do not get back in that helicopter, and don't move from that area. I'm thinking a Bigfoot came out and he saw it. He got back in that helicopter and tried to fly it over across to the Lauderdale County, Alabama side, and crashed 50 feet before the shoreline, and bass fishermen saw it go down, and he had a panic look, and it happened so quick that you don't know to react, to drive over there and try to save his life. It's like, I can't believe this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't believe I saw a Bigfoot.
Right.
Like, it freaks people out. And there's two bass fishermen, time they got started with the helicopter, it always sank. And it was, I think he sank in 50-foot deep water, which he was still in the river channel. And it took, once they got there, the bass fishermen called the sheriff's department in Florence, and they related to the Carver County people, which I think is Muscle Shoals area.
Okay.
And so they finally got some help out there, and it took maybe about 2 or 3 days to find the helicopter. It took 10 days to recover the body. And it had floated almost toward Waterloo, Alabama.
Wow.
And that's about 5 river miles north of there.
Yeah, there's definitely squatch out that way.
Yeah, and Tim Kumbo told me personally on the phone that he was out bass fishing in Bear Creek, and that's right across from Waterloo, and it was broad daylight, and the sun was out, and here comes a Bigfoot coming right out of the woods and strolling down the beach like he owned the place.
Yeah.
And Kumbo was like maybe about 50 to 70 yards out in the middle of Bear Creek. He saw it.
Yeah, well, look, I remember me and him talking, and I went on a map, and he goes, look at that, and we kind of pinpointed where he grew up, and he goes, and right there is Booger Bottom, and you know why they call it Booger Bottom, and yeah, it was pretty crazy, pretty intense down there. So,
Tim, he always says he's never seen the Dogman, but he went camping at LBL. I think my friend Walker DeShazer was there, but he was in his truck camper and not too far from where Tim's tent was. And the guy was sitting around the fire, and Tim, dog, he has German Shepherds, and he was on his cockpit where the dog freaked out and tried to go up under Tim's cot and bumped Tim awake, and it's like 3:30 in the morning, and his dog was freaking out,
Yeah.
And Tim didn't know what was going on. The guy at the fire saw it, and he just froze right where he was, and the Dogman was 6 foot behind Tim Baker's tent.
Yeah.
I said, Tim, get you a tank. Don't sleep in no tent.
Yeah, I heard that story too. Yeah. Yep. Now,
And so,
that one,
go ahead.
The thing that you were just talking about before we got into talking about Tim real quick, you had kind of talked about a black cow. You had mentioned black cow, but there is something that you stumbled across during your years of life and travel and traveling along the waterways that you heard some law enforcement kind of talk about codes for these things one time.
Yeah, I was at LBL at Lake Barkley State Resort Park with Scott. We boated up, and I'm thinking it was 2010. I'm thinking that's when it was, 09 or 10. And so we had pulled up at the marina. This big old 6'6" game warden, Kentucky State game warden, came over there and, sniffing around the boat. He said, "What are y'all doing up here?" I thought, "We're just out here sightseeing, looking at different terrain and eagles and all that stuff." And he looked, "Well, how come you ain't got no fishing gear?" I said, "Like I told you, we're up here looking for eagles. We're not fishermen." And he kind of looked around the boat. I said, "Well, look, just go ahead and look the boat over." So he got in and looked around and couldn't find any contraband with marijuana and what he's looking for, or hard liquor. And I said, "Well, I told you we don't do that." And he looked at me, he goes, "Is that your boyfriend?" I said, "No, that's my cousin." And he made me mad. I thought, "All right, you butthead."
Right.
And so Scott and I went up here and got a room. And so I was sitting in there. Scott was talking to his girlfriend. So I saw them sitting at a round table. I went over there and sat directly behind that big old state park ranger, wildlife officer. And he looked at me. I said, "Well, he had to talk to his girlfriend. He had to have some privacy." So I was drinking some coffee, and I leaned in as he was leaning up toward the table, and they were talking about Dogman and Bigfoot, but they were calling it Black Cow, which would be Sasquatch, and Black Dog is Dogman.
Mm.
And they were using those code names, and they were saying that when you get called out, a radio patrol call from the like sheriff's department or whatever, whoever dispatched your calls to you, they'll always say Black Cow or Black Dog. That way you know how to be on high alert and call for backup. And so that's what they would call them. And I found out in Tennessee circles about some law enforcement officers I went to academy with at Donaldson in '81 that they investigated a call at Fort Pella State Park Campground, which is on the Mississippi River bluff overlooking the Mississippi River bottoms. And these two bicyclists were bicycling from like New Orleans all the way up to Minnesota. And they were coming out of Memphis and got held up. And they should have stayed at Mean and Shelby Forest State Park, but they went ahead and pressed it, and they got to Fort Pella, right as it got dark, set up their tents, and they were the only ones down on that end. They were like on the end, there's other campers up toward the front of the park. And apparently 2 dogmen came up, grabbed them and pulled them out of their tent and just, slaughtered them right there, tore them up real bad. And so the people were walking, came up on the tent and ran down there and called the park ranger, and they got up there, and then I think the Highway Patrol and the Sheriff's Department, Lauderdale County, Tennessee Sheriff's Department was up there, and they said Black Dog tore them up, which they were mean dogmen, but they said a pack of wild dogs came up there. I mean, tore them up, tore the tent up. I mean, pulled them out of the tent and just ripped them up.
Yeah.
And so, there's things that's saying there's a lot of things that are going on is what's not being said. Like the Cott County people that got tore up.
Yeah.
All right. They're saying probably cougar, mountain lion, panther, bear, or something.
Well, they blamed a guy and his dogs on that.
Yeah.
And the 3 dogs that were found by Amber Miller were licking her, which dogs do when you're bleeding.
Yeah.
They weren't dangerous, and a good Samaritan was able to excuse me, was able to get Amber Miller or the dogs away and not get bit. So none of it makes sense there. You know, they've got these, they just want to keep it hush hush and quiet for some reason, and it makes no sense to me. It's more I think it's more dangerous keeping the secret than letting the public know. You know, they treat us like we're kids, for gosh sakes.
Well, there's a deal up in Monroe County, Kentucky, which is just to the northeast of Nashville, Tennessee. And the sheriff's department went out there and they tore up. They didn't really tear them up. They just removed the heart, and they scratched them around the neck, and they bled to death. A donkey and some other farm livestock.
Yeah.
And the sheriff's department goes, and so the DNR, Kentucky DNR came out, and then the wildlife officer came out and said that was probably done by cougar or mountain lion or whatever. And the sheriff said, I ain't having no part of this. So he found somebody that knew about the black dog, black bear, and what it meant. And so he wouldn't have anything. He was leaning toward the black dog, but really the Dogman, what he was leaning toward.
Mm-hmm.
But the DNR shut him down. He said, you cannot talk about these things being Dogman or walking wolves or any of that stuff. You got to go by our codes and what we use. You do not discuss this in public. This is something we have to hide under these code names.
Right.
And so they shut him down.
Yeah.
He said, we can have you removed from office if you keep this up. And so they shut the man down, but he wasn't buying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's stuff is going on and has gone on for such a long time, but it's being blamed on other creatures that are doing the killing when we know it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And there's stuff that goes around Pickwick Lake. I mean, I was driving. One of the things I used to do is drive around just look at the lay of the land and, see what's going on. I guess by old patrolman days, I kind of started doing that again. I saw a guy cutting hay. It's usually around June when they do that. This guy had a 30-06 with a scope riding shotgun with him. I go, I ain't never seen that before.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And then we had all these fires up around Bruton Branch and up around Pompey's and Dry Creek area, and they would go in and just ransack the kitchen, get all the food out, and then set the thing on fire. I said, why have they got to burn the cabin down? Just take the food and go. And of course that didn't make sense, because that Dogman, they'll tear up a inside of your home and stuff.
Yeah, but how are they going to set the fire?
Well, they can scratch the wires and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Unless the police were doing that to cover it up too,
Well, you never know about that.
You think insurance company goes in and sees all these gash marks and stuff. How are we going to explain this? Well,
that's true.
Quit.
That's true.
So, like you just said, there's a lot of things going around in your area.
All the time.
Yeah. Well, let's take Dogman out of the equation, and you've seen some other strange things that almost resemble a reptilian. And
yeah, this was at my home. I live in North Wind Springs. I'm not going to tell you the street I live on, but
that's all right.
Anyway, it's between it's between Pawnee Cove, Dockside Cove Road, and Windy Pine. Having our house redone after my parents' mother had passed away and Dad was in a nursing home still alive, and this was 2017 into 2018. and this was in August or early part of September. And the reason I can tell you that is because the oak leaf hydrangeas, when they're really pretty in May and June, but you get on into August and September, usually have a drought problem and the heat's real bad, and they'll turn a kind of a faded green and a yellow color to it. I was sitting there in the guard room on a futon bed, just, listening to encounter shows, probably yours too. And anyway, I saw something coming out of Dockside Cove Road, and it was coming toward their carport. I happened to look up just as it was between the carport and the big pine tree where the oak leaf hydrangeas are real thick in there. And the color on that matched the hydrangeas, a yellowish green. And I had perfect shot. I was about 15 feet off the ground, and I had a perfect line of sight, which is about 25 or 30 feet from this thing. And it was the size of that 2014 Nissan Sentra 4-door I have, but it was crouched down real low, so it only came up to maybe where the door and the window met. And it was all crouched down, and the skin it looked like the embedded beads on a Spalding basketball.
Okay.
And it saw a car go by, and it crouched down and it went behind that pine tree, and I had a good shot then. And then as soon as the pine tree lit, it took off, but it stayed down low on all fours, running like a lizard. And at first I thought it was a Dogman, and I go, that's no Dogman.
Right.
And it now that I think about it, it looked more reptilian. And there's one thing I made a search on all the rivers in Tennessee, in the Tennessee River, and the Cumberland River, and the Forked Deer River, and the Obion River, and the Loosahatchee and the Hatchie are 12,000 years old. Now, it makes you wonder what's really in those rivers.
Yeah.
And, when I went down to the 10-time waterway, we went all the way down I got down almost to the last lock and dam, and the lock operator wouldn't let us through. Maybe going to make us wait about 10 hours. And so we were coming back up to Demopolis yacht basin, and we saw these two guys. They were stranded out in the middle, so we hauled them back to the boat ramp. And I asked him, I said, how far is this from Mobile? And he said, about 30 miles. And I said, are there any sharks in here? He goes, oh, man, there's like 9 and 10-foot bull sharks. Don't get in this water like that. Because I had a feeling there were. Okay, now the waterway's been open since June of 85, and this is 37 years later. If a lock swings open and a boat goes in, no matter the size, how come a bull shark couldn't go in there with them? And then when the lock swings open, as you step it up toward Lake Pickwick, at the end, a bull shark can go up through there.
Yeah.
Just
follow its way. I mean, they're
and
not dumb.
if you look on YouTube, it's got Cole Walker, Cole Walker, bull shark, Pickwick Lake, and he's got on a pink golf shirt, and he's giving us talk about bull sharks. He said he encountered across from Pickwick State Park, and the deepest area of Pickwick Lake is right in there at 148 feet deep. And that's just about half a quarter of a mile past, before you get to Pickwick Dam, where the turbines are. And he said he saw a 9-foot bull shark, and it hit his boat, like rammed it and hit it a couple of times, and he got his boat and took off. I think it was his uncle or somebody. And then they got off the water, and he was giving a presentation at like I think one of the restaurants around here, and in the audience was about 2 dentists in there. So I asked him, I said, was he telling the truth about that bull shark? He goes, well, he appeared that he was, and I got to thinking, what else is around here?
Yeah, yeah. If a
You know,
bull...
I mean, how long has Dogman actually been here?
For a long time, I'm afraid. A very long time.
I think these Dogman and Bigfoot creatures have been in these. All right, LBL was made into a national park, a federal funded park in 1963.
Yep.
I think they were there all along, and the only way they could get them to get people out of the area were to move them out and make that a federally funded park. I remember that was about first grade. I remember them taking people out like Golden Pond, Kentucky, and just little small areas where people lived and stuff, and making that a federal park. And I got to looking at that. That struck an oddity in me. So when I looked down at Harpinsville Road, there's a place called Bentonville National Forest, and the Mississippi Bigfoot Club goes down there, and then there's a guy named Don Peak, wildlife deal. He's on Facebook. That's somebody I wish you'd get on your show, is Don Peak. I don't know how to. I'll try to send him an email and get him to call you or email you, and I'll send him that information.
All right.
But
yeah, if you do that, I appreciate that.
He goes up to the LBL and all that. He called a Dogman, and I said, well, all right, let me ask you a question. Now, this looks like the Anubis Dogman. Okay. I mean, you can see him plain as day. And I said, how far away were you when you took that Dogman shot? And he said about 300 yards. I said, that's still pretty close. And he was kind of hung over a log, had them big pointed ears looking directly at him. And there was like a little creek or branch or something between them. And I think that was up at LVL.
Yeah, if you don't mind, do that for me. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I like to hear and he's shown me some Dogman sightings, and he's real big into cryptids, and he goes and finds these, and he camps in a tent. I go, you must have like Kumbo, y'all must be Superman, sleeping in tents and during these Dogman and Sasquatch. And I asked him, I said, you reckon Dogman smells your campfire and your coffee cooking and stuff? He goes, yeah, I'm sure he does.
Yeah. That's
so
crazy.
there's stuff that's going on that has been going on that we don't really know how long this has been going on.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the rivers in that area, 12,000 years old.
12,000 years old.
There was a glacier all throughout that area. I think when everything kind of melted and things kind of turned lush again, these creatures found a beautiful habitat with water, plenty of food, plenty of shelter, everything it needs, and just settled in. And unfortunately, the people are so scared and so afraid that they don't want to get ridiculed, first of all, by seeming crazy that they seen these things. And
I'm sure that you have, if you're going to work on a federally funded program like building lakes and dams, railroads, the Natural Trace Parkway, anything like that, the military parks and stuff, you have to probably sign a disclosure. Whatever you see, you tell us, and we'll tell you what to do with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. More than likely, you'd have to, any kind of thing like that, yeah. Yeah,
so I'm sure they have to sign you can't go tell what you saw on these federally funded lands.
Yeah. Kind of like Vegas, what happens here stays here.
That's right. And so I think a lot of things have gone unreported or have been reported but are not being told correctly. Yeah. And your show is now illuminating that to everybody who tunes into your show. You have expounded since I came on about a year ago, came on to your show, and I said, Jeffrey is really expounding his limits and really incorporating the UFOs, the aliens, the reptilians. Is all true. It needs to be told.
Yeah, everything needs to be shared. I think there's a connection, you know, and I don't know what the connection is, but I want to figure it out. And I think that
you do an extra job, by the way.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
I'm not meaning to be a brown nose, but you really are. When you get Tim Kumbo Baker come on and talk for 2 hours.
Yeah, that was a good show. I had a good time with him. He's a great guy. He is a great guy. Listen, we're coming up on time. Do me a favor, don't hang up. But is there anything that you'd like to say to the audience before we end the interview?
I'd like to tell everybody that listens to Jeffrey's show, please tell people, let's get his subscribers up over a certain amount, because this man is truthful, he's honest, and he's telling it point blank. Can't beat that.
I appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you, sir. It really does. You've been around for a long time, and you know a lot of people. And, you know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know Kumbo. So, you know, well, I appreciate it.
You're welcome on that. You're welcome.
So, all right, my friend, don't hang up. It was great talking to you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Ronald Coleman Jr. That name, that man just makes me smile. Makes me smile and laugh. Subscribe to the channel, then put me in touch with Claudia. Then from there, Kumbo. And he is just a super nice guy, full of information. And I wouldn't have had the honor of meeting Kumbo or Claudia, you know. And through Claudia, I met other people, which really blew me away as well. People that YouTubers don't talk to. Unless you've got a huge channel and you're well past 500,000 subscribers. But I was able to have 2 conversations with Josh Gates. Unbelievable. Super nice guy. Just awesome. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you for putting me in touch with Claudia and Kumbo. Guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes this channel honestly so special and what continues its growth. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They're out there. They're dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop pushing back, never stop asking questions, and God bless you all.